everybody, welcome back. Jiu-Jitsu 2000 here today. I'd like to talk to you about how to make an Arizona tea can stove that burns alcohol. On my little table here, I have a few items that I'd like to show you that you might need for this process. First thing over here on the left is some scissors. You're going to need some scissors. Next thing is a utility knife. Some sort of utility knife. A permanent marker, like a Sharpie or something like that. Staples, a stapler. A little push pin. Nothing too fancy. You can see that I have a stick in my hand. I use this for like a hammer, I guess you could say. I have a shotgun shell. That'll make sense here in a minute. This is a little metal poker that I made. Nothing too crazy. Safety glasses. Gotta have them. Make sure they're clear of obstructions, nice and clean, and put them on. I have 3 Arizona tea cans, and I have a single soda can. And the reason I like these Arizona cans is if I hold them up here, you can see that the diameter is a little larger. They're quite a bit bigger than a standard can. So I have 3 of them for this project. And then on the end I have some pledge. And again, I'll explain that as we go through the process. Okay, the first step in the process is to take one of these cans, set the bottom down, use the shotgun shell as a guide to rest your marker, and then just spin the can in a circle. I hope you can see this. And this will mark the line in which you're going to need to cut the can. So there's my line. That's where I'm going to need to cut. The next step is I like to set my piece of wood down, and it's about 1/4 of an inch thick, give or take a little bit. Set the shotgun shell on that and do the same thing. If I could hold it still here. Bear with me. The shotgun shell I'm just using as a guide. You can use anything for your guide. You can use a book of matches, or like a box matches or anything like that. But basically you need something to use as a guide. I use a shotgun shell. It works pretty good for me. So there you have it. You have 2 cans. They're both marked. One line is approximately 1/4 of an inch longer than the other. At this point, you want to take the can that's taller, and what we need to do is take our utility knife, and I'm going to use the Sharpie, the pen here, to show the area that we want to cut. We're basically going to come around and cut that area out. Now, I use a Sharpie, not that I need to mark it, but just to show you. So I'm going to take my utility knife blade and very mildly I'm going to run it around the can. You want to be very careful at this point that you don't slip with your knife and cut yourself. Okay, so we're going to make a bunch of revolutions around this can, scoring the same spot. Not too hard. I like to hold the can up towards the top so that I don't crunch the can, because some people I've seen, they hold it down here and you can hear the can crunching and stuff. So I recommend holding it up high. This will give you a good spot to hang on to where you're not going to be damaging the can in any way. This part right here you have to be patient with, and you're just going to continue to score this in a circle, trying to get the same spot until your blade pokes through. So I've been scoring this can a little bit, and I'm gonna get my little poker here and point. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but I've actually poked through right there. There's a little spot where the knife actually went through. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set this can down, and I have another piece of wood, or you could get a hammer. I want to lay my little piece of wood right here directly on the section that the blade broke through, and I'm going to give it a little whack. So it knocked the piece in. I use my fingers, just kind of push. And get that little centerpiece out. Set that aside because we're going to use that in a minute for something. So that's what we have. Okay, from here I want to take my utility knife, and inside the mouth of the can here, I just want to remove any burrs that might be inside there. Just try to get rid of any material that might be hanging inside of there. Nothing too crazy, just make it, you don't need to spend all day doing it. Just want to make it smooth so that we're not jagged and sharp. Just enough where until it's smooth to the touch. So that looks pretty good. Now what I want to do is I want to take my knife and just give the can a little poke. Just enough to open it up, and insert my scissors and just give it a rough cut around. And we'll set this piece aside for now. And now I'm going to take my scissors and worry about getting close to the line now. So just kind of take your time, make sure that you're getting a good straight cut. And most important detail I guess I could share is don't have any kind of little hangs like you do on this, because if something catches it, it could really tear. You see what I'm saying? Whoops. So make sure that everything around this edge is very clean, that there's no splits or anything. That's really important. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to cut this one out. This is going to be the bottom. So I'm just kind of drilling a little hole, not pushing too hard because I don't want it to go through and then gouge my hand out on the other side. So again, we're going to go around fairly quickly, not that close to the line, jagged edges everywhere. Set that piece aside. And again, just like the last one, we're going to go very close to the line. Okay, now these cuts don't have to be exactly perfect as far as the line's concerned. They just got to be close. You know, have things pretty close. Nothing too substantial. You know, if you're off by a 1/16 or even an 1/8 of an inch, it's not that big a deal. Okay, I'm going to take my push pin and I'm just going to set it aside over here for a second on the end of the table just to get it out of the way. So, I have a bottom and I have a top. And again, the bottom is just a little bit shorter than the top. So I'm going to set those aside. So now what I need to do is I need to take my cutter, my scissors, and cut a straight line down this section. Then I need to go all the way around and try to make these edges fairly straight if you can. Set that aside, we don't need that. So this bottom, you see the bottom is fairly straight. Fairly straight. Got one little hang there. I want to go ahead and pull that because I don't want to find that the hard way later. Now, this is the important part. I want to take the bottom piece, okay? And I want to lay it down, and I'm going to lay this section that I just cut, and I need to mark it so that this section is going to be the same height as the bottom. So I'm just kind of holding my Sharpie and giving it a line. I know this line looks very primitive, and it is, but I just have to get some sort of little mark. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, so that's what we have. Now I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut on that line. In fact, I'm going to go just a little bit on the short side. Just a hair on the short side. Nothing too crazy. So like, I mean, you know, if you could cut right down the center of the line or go just on the other side of the line. See, I just cut on the short side. Throw this piece away, you don't need it. Okay, so we have a piece that looks like that. Okay, at this point, I'm going to take this last can, poke my knife through, and on the side of the can here you can see the little line where the paint ends and the aluminum color is. I want to take my scissors, again, first make a rough cut. Okay, set this part aside. And now that part that I mentioned, the part where the paint ends and the aluminum color starts, I want to take my scissors and follow that line. And basically what I'm making is a little guide. Try to make these cuts pretty straight. There's one thing that I notice about these cans versus regular soda cans is these cans are just a little bit thicker. The aluminum's a little thicker. So I have this little piece. It's a guide. I don't need this piece anymore. Okay, now the next step, I'm going to take this piece of aluminum and I want to put it in a circular form into the guide. I'm going to use this guide to get a measurement of how big of a circle I need this to be, because I need it to fit right in that circle. So like that. See that? How it fits inside nice and clean? That's what I need. So I'm going to basically take my measurement, and inside of the can here you can see the layers come together where my thumb's holding them. You can see the two layers. I'm going to put my stapler inside, and on my stapler you see there's a little notch. I'm going to line that notch up with the pieces of metal where they're coming in contact with each other. And I'm going to push a staple through so that I have the flat side of the staple inside this circular part. So now I'm going to check again and just make sure things are fitting correctly, just to double check before I go putting any more staples in. And things are fitting well, so I'm going to put another staple in the middle and a third staple up top. So I have 3 staples inside. Now on the outside you can see this section. I want to do the same thing. So I'm looking inside, getting an idea of where my staples are going to go. 1, 2, 3. So I have a piece that looks like this. Now you can see I have a small overlap right here. So I'm going to take my scissors and just clean this up a little bit. Nothing too crazy. Just need it fairly straight. Same thing, make sure both ends are pretty straight, and they are. So now you see where this little triangle is? Not that that matters, but on the bottom I need to notch out a small triangle. One on each end. So I need 2 of them. Make sure that those triangles are not too high. And now I want to take the part with the triangles that I cut out and compare it against this piece one more time. And if you look inside, you can barely see daylight back there. Right there where my poker is, you can see the triangle. You can barely see my poker in there. Flip it around and look at the other side, and you can barely see daylight through where those triangles are. And what those are is those are fuel holes that's going to let the fuel, when I pour the fuel in the center, it's going to let the fuel out into the outer part of the stove. Okay, at this point I have the top in my hand and I have the bottom here. I want to take my section with the fuel grooves and put them down into the bottom section of my can. So it looks like that. I'm going to set that on the table, and now we're going to use a little bit of pledge on the top piece. We're going to put some pledge inside here. This is going to be basically a lubricant to help us put these pieces together. Now we want this top piece to go outside of the bottom piece. So I'm just kind of meshing them together a little bit. Be careful not to tear your cans up. Just take your time, be patient. Everything is well lubricated, so once you get it matched up, everything should slide together fairly easily. This is a slightly cumbersome process, but it's nothing too hard. Now you notice I got it started, but if you look inside, where is it? From the outside here where my finger is, you can see this dent. I'm going to reach in with my thumb and just kind of pop that dent back out. Now, while the cans are still lubed, they'll fit together very easily. See, there's a little, up on the top there, there's a dent. Just pushing it out with my finger. Pushing it back out. And from here I'm squeezing with my thumbs. Very lightly. Nothing too crazy. You could rest this thing down and you could tap it slightly with a hammer. Don't tap it too hard. Just take your time and be very patient here. And what I'm doing is I'm tapping it down until the centerpiece comes close to this rim inside. And once that happens, then I'll help it fit itself. So I'm just tapping. Not too crazy, okay? Just taking my time, being patient, no big deal. If you hit it too hard, you could damage the project. So if you feel like you're slipping or anything, you can apply a little bit more lubricant to it. In our case, we happen to be doing pretty good though. So we're getting close. You see inside there, it's getting close. So we have what? 1/8 of an inch to go. Okay. Still nothing. Remember this piece from earlier? I flipped the can over. I'm going to set that inside. Put my rod in there. And go downward. Now, let me back the camera out. Now, that piece that fell was the piece from the bottom. Now we're getting close to where we can start to line this inner piece in around this groove so that it'll fit. Okay, so I'm going to put the can back down, put this little piece back in the can in the bottom, and all that piece is for is protection of the aluminum. Tap a little more, flip it over, see how we're coming together. And what we want is a nice snug fit from the top to the bottom with this inner shield. If you feel it with your finger and you still feel it's kind of loose, just sink it a little more. Nothing too crazy. If you're tapping this inner can down and you see it moving and then you see it stop moving and the sound of the striking here changes, you're probably seated all the way. Don't go much farther, otherwise you could dent the can. See, like in our case, I can hear that that's seated. So now, this centerpiece, all it was so that I didn't tear up the bottom of the can. If I'm going to tear anything up, I'd rather tear this piece up because I'm going to discard that anyway. So now I'm looking at the top. I'm reaching inside, filling. And when I put my finger on these staples, I'm kind of pushing up and down. And if I have any kind of vertical movement up and down, I need to seat it a little more. So I had a slight bit of movement. Let's take a look. Look inside. There's my yes, now we're nice and tight. Everything looks good now. We're good and tight inside. And we're looking down in there. And you can see that the fuel areas are exposed. So you can see it. And there's the other one. Everything looks good. This came together pretty well. Okay, now what I'd like to do is make my holes for my jets. So I'm going to start by making 4 holes. Basically 1 hole on each corner. So there's 1. 2. 3. And I'm measuring from side to side of these holes, this one and this one, and I'm finding the center here. So I have 4 holes, all spaced evenly. So we have 4 holes. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make 4 more holes in these centers. 1, 2, and so on. So I'll show you what that looks like. So it's important to get these as centered as you can. If you get these holes off, it's not going to affect your flame or anything like that. Your stove will still work fine. It's just going to be more cosmetic than anything. 2. Another good thing about knocking these holes is if you have any more seating to do on your inner can, it'll seat a little more during this process. 3. 4. So now I have a total of 8 holes. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 is what I'm going to end up with. So I'm going to go basically between the center of all of these and put 8 more holes. That'll end me up with 16 holes. And that's the perfect amount of holes for a stove like this. So that's what it looks like. I have 16 holes on the top of my stove. From here, I'm going to flip it around and look at the bottom. And you see that this outside is a lot longer than the inside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my scissors from the outside, and using this inner round area as a guide, I'm basically going to rest my scissors against that. It's hard to show this. I'm basically going to rest my scissors on there and trim the excess of this bottom off. You want to make this cut fairly clean if possible. I'm at an awkward angle right now because I'm trying to do it good for the camera. So let me go ahead and give it another quick little trim here. So you're just using that as a guide to cut the excess off. So that's what you look like now. Okay, I did just a slight bit more trimming. Now what I'm going to do is take my wooden block and I'm just going to fold this outer edge in over this lip. Now don't worry about that pledge, that lubricant being on here, because when I fire this stove, that pledge is going to burn off. So it really helped the process of putting the can stove together. So I just molded those over the edges. I just smashed it over the edges at the bottom. Used a piece of wood. You could use your finger, but I like to use the wood because it doesn't mess up my fingers. Okay, I would like to talk about structure real quick. Here I have a stove where the bottom came up over the top. Okay, you see that? The bottom overlapped the top. In the design that we made today, the top went outside of the bottom. Okay, the reason I'm mentioning that is because one of them is like a cup that holds all the fluid inside, all the alcohol, okay? So if you have this being the bottom and this top coming around the bottom, you have basically one layer of protection before something can damage the part that's holding the fuel. Where if you put the bottom outside of the top, the bottom is still the one holding the fuel, and what could happen is if you get like a little pinhole or something, or you drop it and it lands on a rock and it damages this outer layer, which is the one holding the fuel, you could leak a lot easier. So when you make your stoves, I recommend that you don't do them like this. And I know this is how I showed to do it in my original soda can stove video, because this is the stove that I made. That's my YouTube star. So I learned from that, because like I said, this cup, this outer is holding all the fuel. The inner isn't doing anything to protect it. But here again, we have the inside, the lower is being protected by the outer, and the lower is the one holding the fuel. Okay, now what I'd like to do is take this extra can that's been sitting there so patiently, and you're probably wondering, what is he doing with that extra can? I'm going to explain that to you now. Okay, remember earlier when we cut out this piece? We're going to do the same thing with this can. We're going to cut along this line where the aluminum comes in contact with the paint. We're going to cut that line. So again, a quick rough cut all the way around. Set this part away. And now a nice clean cut close to where the paint ends and the aluminum begins. So we're just cutting around there. This will all make sense here in a few minutes. Just bear with me. So try to make this as straight as possible. So there we have it. Let me cut a little bit off. So that's the piece that I made. I'll explain that here shortly. Okay, I'd like to take a quick moment and talk to you about alcohol and the types of alcohol that we want to use in our stoves. Okay, on the left here I have some isopropyl alcohol, and this happens to be 50% alcohol. This is the least choice, I guess I could say, that I would use to burn in these stoves. That'd be my last choice. My second to last choice would be isopropyl alcohol at 70% alcohol. This does work in these stoves. It just takes a little bit longer to prime. This one is 91% isopropyl alcohol. This one works really good in the stoves. This is denatured alcohol. This is the best choice, in my opinion, for fuel for these stoves. Okay, so now I've mentioned that denatured alcohol is my number one choice for fuel. But now let's talk about the cost. The cost of alcohols to power these stoves. Denatured alcohol, this is 1 quart, and it runs roughly between $6 and $8. Okay, you can find this at your local hardware store back in the paint section. It works great though in these stoves. In fact, you can read right here, it cleans glass, it's a clean burning fuel, and they use it for marine stoves and sailboats and things like that. Excellent choice, because when you put this into the stoves, you get a nice blue flame, a nice hot flame, but it's kind of expensive. The 91% isopropyl alcohol is about $2.50 a quart, and I find this at Walmart in my pharmacy section of the store. It works good in these stoves. It's plenty of alcohol content so that it burns clean. The flame is not as blue as the denatured alcohol flame is, but at $2.50 versus $6 to $8 for a quart versus a quart, this is a really good buy. So this is what I normally use in most of my stoves. Going downward, 70% isopropyl alcohol. Okay, this is a good fuel. It works good if your stove is already primed, and what I mean by that I'll explain here in a minute. It works okay. The flame is not as hot as this or as this, but for the money it does work. You might have to take a little more time to prime your stoves, things like that, but I try not to use 70%. And definitely the 50%, I try to stay away from that just altogether. Now, what I have done in the past, I'm taking this one out of the topic here. What I've done in the past is I've taken and bought 1 quart of all 3 of these, and I mixed them all together, and that makes what I have in this container. You see the color is off a little bit, and that's what's in here. I'm just showing you the label, you know, but what's inside is a mixture, and it burns really good. So that's what I normally do. If you don't want to mix fuels for the money, you can't beat this. Works great. So for the video, I'll be using this to show you. That way you can see how it works. It's a good fuel. So I'm going to use 91% isopropyl alcohol. I'm going to fill up our YouTube sensation here. The first one I made. soda pop can stove. And now we'll fill up the new one, the Arizona can stove. Now a stove of this size with this amount of fuel, I haven't done like a time test on it yet to see how long it burns. I might do that at the end of the video. I might fill it all the way up and just let my timer run. But I know these small ones that I make out of a soda can, when they're full, this one will run for about 30 minutes. So I'm going to set this off in the corner just kind of as a reminder of what kind of fuel we're burning. I kind of think of it along the lines of reloading. And what I mean by that is I always like to set my gunpowder next to my press. So now I just started them up. I'm going to kill some of these lights so that we can get a better view of it. Excuse me. And so there you have the stoves. Now they're burning away. This step that you see right now is what I refer to as priming. Now you see how the small stove over here is starting to get flames coming out of the little vents. What makes that happen is the outer section of the stove where the fuel is, the aluminum gets hot and it turns that fuel into a vapor, into a gas, if you will. And that gas is what starts to burn out of these little holes, out of these jets, out of these vents here. But it takes time to heat up the aluminum to get to the point where it heats that fuel enough to do that. And that's what they call priming. That's what they refer to as priming these stoves. They prime fairly quickly. Okay, so we're waiting again, like I said, we're waiting for the outer area to get the fuel primed. See, I kind of blow on them a little bit. This new Arizona one is starting to come out of all the vents, so it's almost primed. You'll notice when they're primed all the way, because this center flame that you see on these will eventually go away, and you'll just have flames coming out of the ports out here. Okay, while I'm waiting for these stoves to prime, I'd like to talk a little bit about these two sections that I made. This one was made out of the Arizona can because it's larger than the standard soda pop can. And what's cool about this is the standard soda can circle ring, if you will, fits really nice inside of the Arizona can. And what's neat about that is once this Arizona can stove gets primed real well, you can set this on there and it'll naturally fall into the groove. And it'll do a couple of things for me. If it was raining outside, or if there was any dust or dirt or anything like that, it'll help that from getting inside of this stove. The other thing that it does, and I don't know if you noticed, but these flames got a little bit larger. That's because the stove didn't have air to come out the top, but once I put that little lid on, it sealed that top section for air that was escaping, and the air had nowhere to go, so it basically pressurized the stove a little bit more. So you get a little bit more pressure. That's one thing that I like about using that with these stoves. Another thing that I like about it is I have a pot in my hand here. You can rest a pot on that little can that's inside and your flames won't go out. It won't smother the stove and put it out. So that's one reason why in this video I had that little can, because I wanted to show that with you, share that with you. The large one has already primed and the small one is still not hot enough to prime. Now you're probably wondering, what do I do with this Arizona one? That's very simple. I use this to put the stove out. I just come here, boom. Puts the stove out nice and easy. That's what's neat about that. Another thing that's neat about these stoves is once they prime, once they get hot and you relight them, they prime back up fairly quickly. See, I'm already getting flames out of the vents because the aluminum was hot enough. It was already primed. So that's a feature that I like about these little aluminum stoves. Another thing that I like about these lids that smother the flame to put them out is they're made out of aluminum. Okay, now when I used to kill these stoves, what I used to use would have been like the bottom of a, I'm looking on my bench here to see if I can find one, was something like this. I used to use like the top of a tuna can, and I would set it up there, give the stove a little air, and it would put that flame out. The reason the flame's not going out, I think, is because we're so close to this other stove. Normally they go out a lot quicker. But the reason I don't like using these tin lids versus the aluminum is because the aluminum doesn't hold the heat as much. The heat will dissipate a lot faster out of the aluminum than it would with this metal. The metal would stay hot for a lot longer. So let me separate these a little bit. So this is basically how you would put it out. See that? Very easily. And again, it's already primed, so it'll take off fairly quickly. See, it's already coming out. This other little one, which is off of a standard can, I can use to kill my standard stoves. So it actually kind of has two uses. It could be used to kill the standard stove or be used as a pot support for the large stove. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed my video. I hope you found some good, useful information. I want to say thank you guys for all the support, all the kind words that you guys leave me. I appreciate it. I really hope you guys enjoy what I've done here. I'm going to let these burn for a while. Now you see these yellow flames up here. If we were using denatured alcohol, pure denatured alcohol, these flames would not be near as high, and they'd be a lot more blue, a lot darker. So yeah, these things are very light. They're easy to pack around. They boil a quart of water, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes, I'm guessing. And you might be sitting there wondering, how do you know, what do you do for a pot support system? I'll show you that too. So let me kill these real quick. I'll let them cool down and I'll show you what I do for pot support. Okay, hello everybody, I'm back. Right now I have my solution for pot support. Okay, this is a sterno. It's got these little arms on the bottom, sheet metal construction. Open this little door and you can set your stove inside. But the stoves didn't really fit too well. So what I've done is I've taken a tuna can lid and I set it inside there like that, and that makes a nice little platform for me to set my stoves on. So I set it right on there, just like so. And fire away. And notice it's still primed quickly. That's because it was still warm. I'm going to kill these lights again. So you could take your pan, set your pan on top, and that's what I use for a pot support. Works pretty good. You can, I mean, it'll hold a nice little cast iron pan or pretty much whatever you got. A lot of times I use these coffee cans when I'm out in the woods to cook things. I mean, this one, I made a little handle for it and made a little pour spout because I melt candle wax in this one. So there you have it, everybody. Again, I want to say thank you for all the support to my channel. I appreciate you watching. I hope you found some good, useful information. Have a good day, everybody. Bye-bye now.